Sports Talk Chicago. Here for Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's a former NFL quarterback, host of All Things QB, and the founder of Jenkins Elite. Please welcome Tim Jenkins to the program. Tim, great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm pumped up to finally be able to jump on.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Your film analysis is second to none, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Starting with the Bears, Justin Fields, Patriots. What do you make of that game on Monday night, first off?
I mean, I think I was more or less just as excited as everybody else, right? I think I've worked Justin into the weekly rotation, so now that I've got him in the weekly rotation, I feel like I'm like everybody else, kind of rooting for him because I don't want to break down bad tape. But no, I think it was a really good game. I think, listen, we're making a lot out of the design quarterback runs, and I do think that was a good step in the right direction. But to me, what's always going to be his most explosive plays are scrambles, right? Where, hey, he drops back. It's 3rd and 18. He makes someone miss in the pocket, and he goes and gets 20. That's as good as it gets. So I do think the designed runs, it was an exciting thing to see. Hey, okay, they're leaning into him a little bit athletically. But to me, just the way he was working his progressions, I thought was really good. And I think the way they're designing the pass plays are really helping him versus kind of where they've been at early in the season.
So what made the difference based on what you saw on tape on Monday versus early on in the year?
I think they're using more pure progression. So I always say, not to boil it down too simple, but I think the NFL is primarily, you get one of two things, right? You either get a PSL, which means pre and post snap look where, hey, to simplify it, let's work the right side against cover 2, left side against cover 3, right? So that's the PSLs. They were doing a lot of those early, which I don't think are super beneficial to a young quarterback who you're trying to expedite his development. The pure progressions are what they did a ton of, which is no matter what, right? Hey, Mooney's our 1. Then you're going to work your tight end. That's our 2. It's not always Mooney, right? But hey, there's a 1, a 2, a 3 on each play. And that's what they did a ton of on Monday. And I think you can just see him playing more decisive with it. And how could you not, right? I think anyone in a hostile environment with a ton of fog going against Bill Belichick, I'd rather be man, here's my number 1, no matter the coverage, and rather than trying to diagnose everything. So to me, I think that's what they're doing more of. There's 2 ways of looking at it, really. I think it helps expedite their growth. Other people would say, hey, listen, it's a bad thing if you have to have a guy with a ton of pure progressions, but then I guess you got to take a shot at Josh Allen and Mahomes still working pure progressions, right? So to me, it's I don't think those kind of criticisms are fair. So I do think it's good that they're leaning into it.
Are the design runs going to be sustainable for Fields moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm the wrong guy to ask. If you watch my career, I went 3 yards and fell over. So I don't know if I can really talk to it, but I do think listen, as long as he continues to protect himself, he does a good job of getting out of bounds and sliding, he'll be fine. If he gets to the point where he's having a harder time protecting himself, then that's something that, they'll have to evaluate.
They said that they were taking plays from the Ravens playbook, trying to do a Lamar Jackson type situation on Justin Fields. Well, what do you make of that when you heard that news?
Yeah, I think when I heard that at first, to me, it's a lot. I would say it was QB sweep, right? You don't see QB sweep anywhere but the Baltimore Ravens, and then Chicago did it. I didn't see a ton of it in the passing game. Baltimore's passing game is completely different than what I think Chicago's trying to get done. I didn't see it show up in the passing game. I do think the QB sweep and maybe some of those, quarterback power where they're reading that, end, and then he'll pull it and keep it vertical. I guess that you could say came from the Ravens playbook. Also, he did it at Ohio State, so it's hard to tell. I'm sure it came from the Ravens stuff too. But to me, it's more or less showing up in those QB design runs. I think everything else, they've got a good track going right now, and I'd love to see them stay on that path versus, try to get too crazy with changing the concepts middle of the season.
What do you make of Fields' progress up to this point?
From when I started watching to now, I think it's been a good, solid trajectory, right? There's, of course, been those games where, you take a little bit of a step back before you take a big step forward. So I think he's doing a good job. I think even, when he's working those PSLs, right, where it's, hey, this side versus certain coverage, this side versus another, or it's a mirrored concept and we want to do dealer's choice based on a numbers count. I think he's doing a better job with them than when I first tuned in. So to me, I think it's gradual. I really, for me, I want to see him continue on this path of being really good with his eyes and pure progressions, being decisive with the football, and then not being afraid to go make a play. The off season is where you're going to expect him to make a huge jump in those like 2-shell, 3-shell type reads, because it's like, I think he's getting better at them in the season, but it's so hard to dedicate the amount of time needed, in my opinion, in the season to really get those right. So I think you'll want to see that big jump going into next year. But I do think this year we want to see him keep on that path with the pure progressions, his eye placement, and then being decisive with the football when he does know where he wants to go.
Do you think he's at the right track right now, career-wise? A lot of people here in Chicago said it should be quicker. He should be doing better. What do you say to that?
I would say, we forget that Peyton Manning threw 40-something interceptions, right? Or whatever it was in his first 2 years. And we want it. Like, listen, I get why Mahomes seemingly didn't struggle. But outside of him, we all look at Josh Allen now and we're a big fan. They were trying to run him out of town. So, it's like, I don't know. I think he is making enough growth on tape that I would feel really comfortable as a coach coaching him again, right?
Okay.
If on tape I was seeing a bunch of the same type of issues, I would have concerns. I don't see that. I could even boil it down to 2 plays, okay? Early in the game, he goes alert, alert against the Patriots. They're in empty, alert, alert. He checks to the cover 0 screen, gets batted down. Same exact look later in that half, alert, alert. What does he do? He pump fakes him and then bad arm angles it. To me, that's like inside of a game, extreme growth. So if that doesn't kind of say, okay, this kid gets it, he's starting to follow, and not to mention, like, we forget how hard it is to ID cover 0 and get to the alert check to begin with, right? Like, that's not something that he was doing last year. That's not something that a lot of quarterbacks do, super early. So he deserves credit for that. But then I also think he deserves credit for like, hey, okay, I'm going to pump him now and work it this way. So I there's enough on tape that he's consistently growing that I would feel good if I was, the coach up there of, hey, I want to keep coaching this guy. I want to see how far we can get him. I think if some of those decisions don't improve next year, then yeah, you would start to say, okay, maybe we need to start looking for another quarterback. I, in my opinion, I think it would be a huge mistake to move on from him currently where we sit after week 7. Now, he could have 10 straight weeks of really bad football, and then we would revisit this conversation. But where he sits right now in week 7, I just have a hard time moving on from him and drafting one of these other guys who, as we loved their college game, but we loved his college game. So it's like, you gotta be careful when we think we have a surefire prospect.
Well, how much of other factors do affected Fields? I mean, the Bears have one of the worst wide receiving cores in football, measurably. Their offensive line isn't the best. They have a rookie head coach, rookie offensive coordinator. How much of those affected Fields too?
Yeah, I think it affects it a ton. And here's the other thing: you could make a halfway decent argument that Russell Wilson in Denver has struggled more than Fields, right? Like, it's not a perfect argument, right? But you could make one. So if you could make one on a guy who makes $250 million and is a former Super Bowl champion and has a rookie head coach with probably better weapons, we should probably give Fields a little bit more slack than we give Russ. So to me, that's where I agree with you 100%, where it's like there are so many factors, and I think he's playing well despite a lot of those factors. And to me, it's hard because when the dynamics of the NFL of guys wanting to get their guys in there are going to factor into the decision. In terms of just me sitting on the outside looking in without like a my guy type incentive, I wouldn't move on from him. Now, they still might decide to move on from him right at the end of the season. I just wouldn't be in that camp right now, just strictly based on the tape.
Do you think Luke Getsy's the right guy for Fields from an offensive perspective?
I what they're doing on offense has progressively gotten better. So I want to say yes, because I evaluate offensive coordinators probably a little different than most. Like, most are like, okay, well, how good is the offense? I like to see guys that get better with their guys. So, hey, we started out running a bunch of these mirrored concepts, dealer's choice, and then he's progressed into this, hey, let's help Justin's eyes, doing some different things. To me, that's a good offensive coordinator. Like, and this isn't a shot at Adam, but like Adam Gase with Peyton Manning, I don't think is like a great offensive coordinator. as much as like I kind of like Mike McCoy with Tim Tebow. Like, Mike McCoy didn't want to run any of that stuff he ran with Tebow, right? Like, no coordinator would want to, but he did, and they were successful. Like, that to me, I think is a good coordinator. So to me, with the way they're adjusting, I think, yeah, definitely the right guys in the room because they're adjusting to his strengths. If they were sitting there continuing to run the same stuff and the team was still struggling, I would say probably not. But to me, with the growth that we've seen, I think you kind of got to look at that and say, man, they're adjusting to this kid. They're trying to put him in the best situation possible. That's really what you want from a coordinator, and especially with a young, quarterback like they have in Chicago.
What plays should Getsy call that would continue to better Fields? Like, what would you suggest Getsy call more moving forward?
The only thing that I do not think we get enough of right now is shot plays off of like a really good, I call them run action versus play action. So play action, think O-lines and pass pro. It's just me and the running back working the fake. Run action, hey, we're going to pull a guard. We're going to make it look like power. The protection's not as secure, but you're going to get more influence. I want to see more run action shots. And the reason I say that is because if I'm coaching Justin Fields, the protection's not secure anyways. So who cares, right? Let's pull a guard, see if we can influence him a little bit more. Worst case scenario, we lose the 3 tech and Justin's going to make a miss, right? Like he's shown that on tape. So I would be open with him about that. Like, listen, I want to work in more run action shots. Pro's going to be a little bit not as secure, but we're going to influence some more safety so we can let it rip. Let's get on the same page about this. And I guarantee Justin would be sitting there like, hell yeah, I want to let this thing rip a little bit more downfield. And I think it's going to be beneficial for everybody. So that's what I would say. If there was one thing that I would love to see them increase the number of, get to like 2 or 3 of these a game, would be those run action shot plays.
What's your take on the rest of the Bears season? Do you see more growth for Fields, and do you see this team progressing a little bit more offensively and defensively?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I don't think there's anything that I've seen where you're like, man, it looks like there's a big setback coming. The only way I see this offense the production is going to be based game in and game out on if Fields can make people miss when protection breaks down. Because when they've had really good games, Justin's been able to spin out of there and make plays. When they've had Washington Commanders, right, where it's still a chance to win an NFL football game, so let's not, completely trash them because they basically were an inch short of winning in the NFL, which is everybody knows the hardest thing on planet Earth to do. But their production wasn't the same because he wasn't making people miss and then creating a scramble. So to me, that's where this offense is either going to have production or no production based on those, hey, second effort plays where he's getting out of the pocket and making a play. I think all signs lead to continued growth. That's not going to say that we're not going to have some bumps. There's going to be some bumps. There's going to be a 3 or 4 interception game. Like, people got to be ready for it. It's going to happen eventually because he is aggressive with the football. So that's where, to me, I'm like, I see a lot of growth coming. I do think the production is strictly based on, hey, is he making people miss when the protection breaks down?
Tim Jenkins, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Tim, a few more questions before we finish up. First up, let's talk about your career for a minute. How did you make it to the NFL?
That's a great question. I don't know. My wife tells me all the time she has no damn idea how I made it. So, no, I think I went to a tiny little D2 school. I was lucky to, play for 4 years. So I started 4 years, and then, I was lucky that the Rams called me after the draft and signed me. So that was, I went from, thinking I was going to sell insurance to being able to be a rookie, which was fun. And so did that. They got let go, went up to CFL, which was a whole different experience. But yeah, I think for me, a lot of it was like, listen, I think I'm probably doing what I was meant to do now and breaking down tape and coaching, because I always was an overachiever compared to my skill set, right? I think a lot of it came from watching a lot of tape and being able to be a little bit ahead of where maybe everyone else was. So that was beneficial to me. And then, it was a good journey, man. It was fun, but it was, it feels like forever ago now. Now I got, 4 Rugrats running around telling dad that he didn't play in the NFL because the Rams are in LA and not St. Louis. So
what was your best moment playing football at any level?
Yeah. So best moments, I always, this is what I tell everybody. And I really believe this. I tell my oldest kiddo, who's like he like loves it. He's just doing flag football, but he like thinks it's the coolest. I think high school. I think like that's the last time you're really going to play with like your just friends, right? Because then you get to college and the locker room's a little different, and then you get to the NFL and it's like it's a business, right? So I think high school is probably where you're going to have the most fun. But honestly, my favorite football memory now is coaching my son. It's like it's flat. It's 5-year-old flag football, but dialing it up against some of those guys is a lot of fun. And then watching the look on his face when he goes and makes a good throw is kind of not to sound sobby, but it's kind of like it's the coolest thing on planet Earth.
So how did you make the shift then from playing to coaching and evaluating film, and then Jenkins Elite starting that up too?
Yeah, so I mean, I think like everybody, right? The second you get fired, you got to figure out something to do. So I was engaged to my wife at the time, and I didn't want her to think I was a loser. So I figured I better start making some money. So I, went and after I got let go with the Rams, before I signed in the CFL, I started training 1 or 2 kids. Then went up to the CFL, did that, came back, and then just, it's going to sound lame, but I drove like 45 minutes and I charged the kid like $10 to do a lesson. So I lost money on gas. But it was just the most fun thing on planet Earth, like seeing those guys get better and being able to teach them stuff that, man, I wish I would have known when I was in college or the NFL, and I can teach them that when they're 12. It was awesome. And then so that grew. And then, what we do now is crazy to me. I always thought it was something that I could do and make a living doing. Now we're in like 9 cities, right? So we have we have San Diego, Denver, we have 3 in Texas, we have Arizona, and then we have some on the East Coast. Like, that's crazy to me. But I think we've grown because we genuinely just care about if the kiddos get better. It's a lot of guys who played who wish they would have had a guy like us in their corner when they were going through their career. So it's a testament to just like genuinely caring about people, and then how fast you can grow by doing that. Right. And I think that's sometimes misinterpreted in today's world, that you can win other ways. And I just don't think you can. I think all you got to do is, if you love up the kiddos and you do right by your clients, you're going to get more. And so we've been lucky to do that. So it was, I think it was hard at first when you're not in the locker room, right? Because you want to play and you want to do that. And then you start getting enough guys that you can see how you can help them along their journey, and maybe help them get there faster than they would have on their own. And then you kind of have the locker room all over again. Right now I get on our coaches call and we have 9, former quarterbacks that run all these locations and talk smack. And I feel like I'm right back in the locker room. So I don't really have anything I miss anymore.
Who was the best quarterback you've trained?
The most successful right now is PJ Walker, especially after he just beat Tom Brady, right? It's hard to beat Tom Brady and then say anyone else. My favorite, I'm not supposed to have favorites, but the favorite kid is now a sophomore in high school. I started with him when he was like a 3rd grader, and, he's like number 18 in the country in passing, and he's a sophomore. Like, he's a freak of nature. He's a great kid. So we're going to his game tomorrow. I'm taking the kiddos and we're going to go watch him play tomorrow. But we've had so many good kiddos, and, it's like super corny, but to me, like, PJ is really, it's such a cool thing because his journey of really believing in himself and going and grinding is awesome. And he's super successful in the NFL. But, I always measure our coaches on the guys who shouldn't have played high school football, right? Like, there's always those kiddos who really had no business being a starting quarterback for their high school, and then they train super hard and they become that. That is so, I think, much more valuable than even the NFL guys, because the confidence you get from just being that guy on campus for a year and then going through the rest of your life, to me, is like genuinely life-changing. The NFL stuff and our big-time college guys are awesome, and I will never get sick of going and watching like our guys play in front of 80,000 people. But I do think there's something to be said about the kids that, get some scholarship money or get a chance to play in high school or college that really probably wouldn't have. That, that's almost even more meaningful. PJ would have been fine without me, right? I like to think that we helped him along his way, but it's fun to, there's a different spectrum of kind of fun when some of those kiddos can go and play in college that probably, didn't really have any business being there.
How rewarding is that for you to impart this knowledge on these younger kids and even these NFL guys, and then see them turn out pretty good or turn out in ways that you didn't expect?
Yeah. It's hard because I'm biased. So I expect, PJ goes and lights it up And everybody else is kind of surprised. To me, I'm like, that's who I know, right? I know him from being able to make all the throws. He had a little, I was joking with my wife. We're watching the game and he has like a little bad arm angle smoke screen that he throws. And I'm like, babe, he's feeling it. Cause I only see that come out in workouts when he's like, really feeling it. And then of course he goes on to have a good game. But I think, yeah, it is super fulfilling. I would be lying to tell you that it's always fun because there's a lot of times that like, man, their wins are their wins, but in your mind as a coach, their loss is like, man, you wish you could have done something. And then you start to hurt for them the same way you hurt for your kid. You've known these guys and you've been there for everything, right? That's what is kind of different. Every coach relationship is good for an athlete, in my opinion. The high school coach, getting that aspect of it, the college coach, but a lot of these guys, like, I'm there for everything, right? Like, I'm there for their girlfriend dumps them, right? And their whole world's over, right? They don't realize it doesn't matter because they're 16, but like, you see everything with them. So you want, by the time they get to college, you hurt with them. We have a kid who's going through some stuff with like his coach has said some things to the media and you sit there and you listen to all of it. And then you're like, it takes everything in me with right now that I have a decent following to not quote tweet it and say something, right? But you can't because you're not going to help them. But it's one of those things that, yeah, the good times are awesome and it is so fulfilling. Those bad times sometimes suck, but you're there for a phone call whenever they need it.
Well, I would say too, I think it's good on you to show as a coach how much you care about your guys.
Yeah.
You see a lot of coaches who aren't that way. I mean, you were getting emotional just talking about one of your guys, and I can only imagine it's probably the same for all the guys you coach up or help develop.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And then I think, as they grow up and then football comes to an end, right? And that's what has been cool. I think with one of my, I think things that have been really cool is we just launched San Diego and we launched it with a guy who I actually trained. He played in the CFL and then now he comes back and launches the location. That to me is like full circle, very cool. Cause I do think coaching and what we do is kind of the next best thing to playing, right? I would never tell someone it's better than being an NFL quarterback because I don't think it is, but it's up there and it's pretty close to the same level of like just being around football, being able to help coach guys and you get a dose of every single level, right? Because back when I was on the field all the time, I trained little pups all the way up to NFL guys when I first started out, and that's like such a different world of what you're coaching, right? With the little pups, you're like, please God, just cross over in front, right? You're just like, don't mess up your second step and your three steps, right? But and then PJ, you're sitting there and you're like, all right, man, you're gonna get trap coverage from Bill Belichick on third down here, right? Like there's so many different things that you do. So it is. It's pretty darn special, and you care about each of them all the same, whether they're taking on Tom Brady or taking on some 8-year-old flag team.
And Tim, before we finish up today, last question for you. What's been the funniest moment that you've been a part of in your career?
Yeah, I know you prepped me for this one too. I think the best one for me was when I learned to 2-hand pump versus single hand pump. So when I got to the NFL, every once in a while you learn to do the 2-hand pump and you don't really care about your pump fakes. I remember trying to pump fake Cortland Finnegan, who I'm sure you guys remember from, Andre Johnson.
Yep.
And I remember 2-hand pumping him and then looking at the safety and coming back, and he is running down the field and he's giving me the bird because he didn't have to react because I didn't have it. And so I'm joking and talking to him after, and he's like, yeah, you got to separate your hands. And I think the things that the DBs know. So to me, it was a funny moment, but also a learning moment of like, these DBs at this level are so good that they aren't going to buy, the stuff that they bought at the college level. So I do think that was probably one of my funnier moments, and also one of those that you took something away from.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining me. Great insights on Fields and the Bears, and great insights on your career too. Looking forward to staying in touch and doing this again soon.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.